What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from SBMTG on the YouTube.com. Down there, we like magic, and it's time for our Amonkhet Pre-Release Guide, the most comprehensive guide you'll find here on the YouTubes for smashing your Amonkhet Pre-Release, because we want you to do well. We really do. Well, in this guide, I'm going to give you all the information that you need to both participate in and crush your Amonkhet pre-release at your LGS, starting with what you get in your pre-release kit, a little basic information about the sealed format in general, a little specific information about this specific Amonkhet sealed environment, and all the best commons and uncommons in every color. So we got a lot of information to go through. I wanted to be as comprehensive as possible so that you know what you're getting yourself into. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing you want to do is go to your local card store and sign up for the Amonkhet pre-release, and most card shops will allow you to sign up before the pre-release actually happens. You pay whatever the shopkeep tells you to pay, usually $25-30, and then you show up for the pre-release and you'll be issued 6 packs of Amonkhet, 1 foil rare or mythic, a random rare or mythic that you can use in the deck you eventually make. You'll also be given a little 20-sided die that you can use for a life counter, and you'll be given this thing called the Trial of the 5 Gods cards. That's basically like a bunch of little in-game missions that you can accomplish to maybe win extra awards from your LGS. That's pretty cool. And this time around, they're actually going to give you a little like deck builder's hints book along with your pre-release pack. And when whoever's running the event tells you that it's time, you'll sit down, you'll crack open your 6 Amonkhet packs, and you'll construct a 40-card deck out of the cards from your pack. This includes, by the way, basic lands which your shop will provide. The usual number of basic lands is 17 and then 23 cards from your packs. But if you've got a really aggressive deck with a lot of low-cost cards, you can make it 16 lands, or if you're running basically a control deck, a lot of high-cost stuff, you can make it 18 lands. But the average number of lands is 17. Now, just a quick tip on the limited environment, whether you're doing sealed or whether you decide to do drafts a little bit later in the season, the most important thing to remember about limited environments is bread. Now, bread is basically the order of importance of magic cards in a limited environment. B stands for bombs. These are cards that are either like huge creatures or they have some kind of crazy splashy effect that like affects the whole game and the board. These are game-winning cards that you want to prioritize, and they can put you into specific colors just because you want to play these cards so much. The R stands for removal. This is cards basically, obviously, that remove other cards off the battlefield, specifically creature removal. That's the most important kind of removal and one of the most important aspects of limited environments. When you get a chance to play removal, you usually do. The E stands for evasion, things like flying, and to a lesser extent menace and even unblockability. But usually when we talk about evasion, we're specifically talking about flying, but any ability that keeps a creature from being blocked as easily. The A stands for advantage, card advantage, more or less. Things that'll draw you cards. The D usually stands for dudes. There's also break, and the K stands for crap. But basically leftover stuff that'll help supplement any synergies in your deck. And the D standing for dudes basically means like just good, solid guys at every spot on the curve. Now, before I get into individual cards and what cards I think are best in each colors, I just want to go over a couple of very basic things about this specific limited environment that I've seen in doing sealed pools and stuff like that. The most important thing is that removal is at a premium in this set. There are a lot of -1 counter strategies and such, and Wizards has compensated for that in the design space by not giving as much traditional removal to us this time around. There are very few cards that at any stage, any range on the curve, say destroy target creature or something similar. Very few cards that do that. White has some removal that it has to really work for. Black only has one really serious targeted removal spell at common or uncommon. And then red still has a little bit of burn, but you've always got the same problems that you'll always have with burn. It doesn't hit every creature. So because of the -1 counter theme, it seems as though Wizards has compensated in the design space by not giving us as much traditional removal. Now, Wizards has also compensated for that, not having as much good traditional removal, by not giving us as many evasive creatures this time around at common and uncommon. Blue and white usually have the most flyers. This time around, there's only like 4 flyers at common and uncommon in each color. So we don't have as many flying or evasive creatures in this set as we normally have at these rarities. And that is because we don't have as much removal, or at least from what I can tell. Now, because of this and certain abilities like Embalm, for instance, then we're going to probably see a fair amount of long attrition battles, ground battles mostly. But that's okay because it allows certain strategies to thrive in this environment where they might not have in a slightly faster format. You know, Wizards went out of their way to produce these trials and cartouches that you see on your screen right here, and you have to have a slower environment for those to work. Same thing with all these monuments that you're looking at right here, you know. We want a slower environment to actually get these things to provide as much value as possible. Now, while I've got the graphic up here and I'm talking about these certain cards, I might as well go ahead and tell you how I feel about them. Monuments, Trials, and Cartouches are all pretty darn good and sealed from what I can tell, but some are much better than others. As far as the monuments, the white and blue ones look the best to me. The green one doesn't look too bad, definitely, but the white one develops your board presence, which is always top priority in Limited, and even Constructed for the most part. And the blue one is pseudo removal, or at least tempo, and it's worth noting, by the way, that when you tap a creature down when you play a creature with the blue monument, even though your guy's summoning sick, he'll still get to swing in before that creature untaps, and this is especially good against exert strategies. As far as the cartouches, all the cartouches are at least playable, especially if you get any of the trials, obviously. But the cartouches that I like are the green cartouche, the black cartouche, and the blue cartouche. The blue one draws you cards and provides an evasive ability that we don't have much of in the format, so that's important. The black one is removal, that makes one of your guys bigger. That's always good and synergizes with -1/-1 counter themes. And the green cartouche is also effectively removal, so that's very important, especially in a color that doesn't get much of that. As far as the trials go, I like the green trial, the red trial, and the black trial the most. The black trial is almost certainly the best. Just removal that, you know, repeats itself is absolutely insane, always very desirable in limited environments. Same thing with the red one. That is removal that effectively repeats itself. And the green one isn't removal, but it's the opposite. It's something that can create creatures for you. So even if you only play that trial, the green trial, like twice, getting a couple of 4/2s is a lot of board presence. Now it's time to start talking about individual commons and uncommons that I like in this set. So before we get to the main colors here, let's talk about all the other stuff. You know, we got Aftermath cards, gold cards, we got lands and stuff. So let me just quickly run through those real quick, starting with the lands. Here we go. Cradle of the Accursed, Grasping Dunes, and Evolving Wilds are all good. Evolving Wilds is always good. Helping you fix your mana and thin your deck is nice. Cradle of the Accursed is basically a creature in the late game with an important creature type in this set, even in the sealed environments. That's good. And Grasping Dunes is effectively removal that also synergizes with a couple of different themes in this format. So all three of these lands are more than playable, and you'll very much want to play them if you get them. As far as the Aftermath cards, a lot of these are rare, but there are some good ones at uncommon, especially Start to Finish, Destined to Lead, and Onward to Victory. I really like Start to Finish as a way to both develop your board and remove a creature. Removal is very, very important, so I think this is the best of the uncommon Aftermath cards. Destined to Lead is great, though, because it can basically provide, it's a combat trick once, which is amazing. You like combat tricks in Limited, and this is a good one, especially considering that you can cast it later on in the game. You can cast Lead out of your graveyard to essentially lure them all into blocking one creature, and you get an Alpha Strike through. So that's good in breaking stalemates, which I've already said I think there will be a fair share of in this environment. Now, as far as gold goes, pretty much every gold uncommon is playable, but some I like more than others, you know. Enigma Drake is a flyer with 4 toughness, and if you can just get 2 cards, instants or sorceries, in your graveyard, you've got a 3-mana 2/4 flyer, which is more than playable. That's very good. On-Crop Champion is a 4-mana 4/4. That's playable right there, but it also untaps all of your Exert guys, and even if your guys don't have Exert, it just gives all your dudes Vigilance. That's cool. Decimator Beetle goes really well with these -1/-1 counter strategies. Obviously, it can make your creatures bigger after you've made them smaller, or maybe your opponent has, and then it can make your opponent's creatures smaller. That's awesome. And then Aven Windguide is insane with Embalm or any other tokens, and it's a flying creature in and of itself. But my favorite of these gold cards might seriously be Merciless Javelineer. It just goes really well with a bunch of different strategies. You know, it goes well with the deck that wants to dump its whole hand. Obviously, it's meant for that. It goes good with cards that say whenever you cycle or discard a card, do a thing, you know. It goes really well with all the -1/-1 counter synergies in this format. That's awesome too. So it just goes well with a lot of what you're trying to do in this limited environment. And aside from that, it is repeatable removal on a stick. That's unbelievable. Okay, so now we can start talking about all the different commons and uncommons in the main colors here. And we'll go through the color wheel in order, starting with white. I actually think white has a number of really good redeeming qualities in this set and supports a lot of other strategies really well. And yeah, that's always been white's jam. It's a supportive color, but it's really good at it this time around, especially when it's supporting exert. It's got a number of ways to create tokens or tap down opponents' creatures to create some sense of parity when you exert your guys. It's also got a fair amount of removal, even if it has to jump through some hoops to get to that removal. And it's got a bunch of embalm dudes too. So let's say you swing through, exert a guy, it might not untap next round, but you can always embalm a dude from your graveyard to block. Now, white supports its different strategies with a number of at least decent creatures that do those things, you know, like as far as exert goes, at common or uncommon, you've got Gustwalker, which is a pretty darn good creature that has an underrepresented ability in flying on it whenever it exerts. That's pretty cool. 2-mana 3/3 flyer, yeah. Take that all day, don't care that I have to exert it. That's a good creature. And it's got solid guys with embalm at common and uncommon, like Unwavering Initiate. That guy's solid. And even though I said flying is underrepresented in this format, white still has the majority of the solid flyers in the format, you know. It's got things like Oketra's Attendant, it's got Seraph of the Suns, and it's got Takrop Elite. Takrop Elite is common and very good. Sure, it's 4 mana for a 2-power flyer, which isn't the best thing in the world, but it's an anthem effect, and flying is something that's really, really valuable in this sealed, so you'll play Takrop Elite. Oketra's Attendant, a 5-mana 3/3 flyer is usually seen as at least a decent or baseline deal in sealed, but when you get that 3/3 flyer twice for 5 mana, that's pretty good. Or it can draw you a card if you're mana screwed. So Catcher's Attendant is an all-star. And Seraph of the Suns is another good flyer. It costs an awful lot of mana, but having an indestructible flyer in this sealed environment, I feel like is probably going to win you the game. As far as tapping down creatures go, we've got Fanbearer and Binding Mummy in this color. Fanbearer is just straight up good and can remove a creature from attacking, you know, it can keep a creature from attacking, it can keep a creature from blocking, or more or less just, you know, your crappy 1-drop can keep their best creature out of the game. Fanbearer is very good, as a matter of fact, and even Binding Mummy works when you've got a fair amount of zombies. There are like 6 zombies at common or uncommon in black, plus a few zombies in white, plus embalmed creatures or zombies, so you'd be surprised how much value you can get out of a Binding Mummy. As far as the removal, white has to jump through a few hoops, but it's all decent removal, especially things like Cast Out and Compulsory Rest. Cast Out, sure, it can be gotten rid of, especially after boards, but it's still a fantastic piece of just unconditional removal that exiles a thing until they can find a way to deal with Cast Out. You probably won't be cycling this card, but just in case, again, you're mana screwed, you can, but Cast Out is premium removal, as is Compulsory Rest. Pacifism effects are always very good, but even better in a format like this where you've got both exert creatures that can get huge when they swing and these black and green creatures that can come in huge at aggressive costs, and all they have to do is put -1/-1 counters on another one of their creatures. But even if they do, they've still got a huge guy at an aggressive cost, so pacifism effects are very, very good. Impeccable Timing and Time to Reflect are also at least noteworthy white removal spells. Impeccable Timing is way better than you ever think it is. It's just, you know, 2 mana for 3 damage, essentially, to an aggressive creature. That's good. And then Time to Reflect, again, lots and lots more zombies than you might initially think. Even if you have just a couple of embalmed guys, Time to Reflect can be 1 mana unconditional removal. And it's not that hard to get it, but watch out. It could be a trap if you don't have enough zombies. I'd be doing you a disservice if I moved on from white without talking about a couple of specific combat tricks and a very good creature at common that I like a lot. First of all, Mighty Leap and Jerry's Resolve are great combat tricks. Jerry's Resolve is very, very cheap. It can untap an exert creature. It can make a creature not die from attacks. It can make a creature not die on blocks. That's awesome. Or you can cycle it if you got no use for it. So Jerry's Resolve is always a good pickup as like a 23rd card for a combat trick. Mighty Leap is always, it's been printed a lot of times, Mighty Leap is always a very good combat trick that can let you block flyers. It can let you get through for damage if you need it to, you know. It can just help you, whether you need the flying or not, kill a guy on attacks or blocks that you wouldn't have otherwise killed. So Mighty Leap is just always good and has a bunch of different uses. And as far as the value creature that I really, really like, I like Supply Caravan more than I thought I would at first glance. Supply Caravan is great because 5 mana 3/5s are at least a decent deal in limited, especially this limited environment where 5 toughness is very good, you know. We've got a lot of creatures that have, you know, 2, 3, 4 power, so 5 toughness is very, very good, especially, again, in a format with with a lot of -1/-1 counters. So whether they're putting them on your creatures or you're putting them on your own, having a guy with 5 toughness is good. And if you've just, for instance, exerted an attacker, that's okay. You play a supply caravan, look at that, you got a tap guy. Now you've got 2 dudes to block in place of the guy that you just exerted. So supply caravan is actually surprisingly good. And finally, Vizier of Deferment is an excellent creature in this environment. Vizier of Deferment can just do so much considering that it has flash. And it's just uncommon. You're likely to pick one up. It's possible. Vizier of Deferment can either protect one of your creatures if something went horribly wrong when you went to attack with it. It can effectively untap an exert creature. That's pretty cool. It can wipe all the -1/-1 counters off of one of your creatures. That's cool. It can repeat and enter the battlefield effect. That's awesome too. It can keep one of your opponent's creatures from dealing damage to you in combat. Oh, and by the way, also did I mention that if your opponent has embalmed one of their creatures and you target it with Vizier of Deferment, well, it's gone forever. So Vizier of Deferment just does everything in this sealed environment, and you definitely want to play her if you pick her up. Now it's on to the next. We get to talk about all the commons and uncommons in blue that I like. And to be honest with you, in all the sealed pools that I've been doing so far, I'm not entirely incredibly impressed by blue. I know a lot of people will be happy to hear that. A lot of people hate blue, but a lot of people, blue's their favorite color, so I'm sorry to tell you that. But blue still has a lot going for it. It's got some cards that are just very good on their own, but it also synergizes well with the cards that, like, whenever you cycle or discard a card, do this. You know, it's got a lot of card advantage, a lot of ways to draw you cards, and it's got a lot of ways of bouncing creatures, which, against embalm guys and tokens, is just as good as removal. So blue isn't as impressive as some of the other things that I see in this set, but if you get the right blue cards, it's still a very playable color. First of all, Open into Wonder is more or less a blue bomb. I've already said I think there's going to be a fair amount of board stalls in this environment, so if you can Open into Wonder for 3 or 4 at 5 or 6 mana, then you can just win the game off of that, or you can draw enough cards to effectively form a game plan and win off of that a lot of the time. Just Open into Wonder is an absolute bomb, definitely, so pick that up if you see it. As far as other card advantage generators, though, we've got Sacred Excavation, which is way better than it looks. It allows you to do things like cycle the cards that you wouldn't otherwise want to cycle a little bit more recklessly because you know that you're going to get Sacred Excavation, and later in the game you can just play them when you cycled them before, So that's very good. Like, you can cycle, for instance, a Lay Claim, and then pick it up a little bit later in the game when you finally got the mana to pay for it. 7 mana looks like a lot, but Lay Claim is a very good card, guaranteed. So Sacred Excavation is much better than it may look to you if you've drafted a few cards with cycling. Hieroglyphic Illumination is just straight up card advantage. So if you're in the, control deck, for instance, in sealed, Hieroglyphic Illumination you'll definitely play. And then Seeker of Insight is great because it's loot on a stick, and that's always good. Also, 2 mana 1/3s are at least decent blockers in the early game, so there's that to consider too. Now, as far as the bounce spells that I really like in blue, and again, these function as removal against tokens, which is very important in this environment. You've got Winds of Rebuke, Floodwaters, and Gale Strike. Gale Strike is also card advantage. It replaces itself in your hand and can get rid of a token forever, or just provide you tempo, or keep one of their creatures from dealing combat damage to you. Maybe they screwed up and played something before they attacked and don't have the mana to replay the guy they attacked with. Lots of ways to make them pay with a Gale Strike, and you get to draw the card. Winds of Rebuke is just very cheap way, super cheap way to send creatures back to their hand. And Floodwaters may be expensive, but you can cycle it if you don't need it at the time. You can use, Sacred Excavation to get it back, obviously. But it just removes 2 things, so it's a built-in 2-for-1. We're always looking for those in sealed. As far as the creatures in blue, that's really where blue's lacking a fair amount of depth. There just aren't great creatures in blue, and usually there are at least a couple, but the best ones in blue are definitely at rare. You've got 2 different Flying Sphinxes at rare. Those are fantastic, but as far as common and uncommon, we don't have a lot, but one of the best, and probably very likely the best blue uncommon, is Angler Drake. Angler Drake is just a big flying creature that essentially removes a creature when it enters the battlefield. And if it's an embalmed creature, the creature's just gone. So Angler Drake can be very, very impressive in this environment. Also, Zenith Seeker is pretty good looking to me. I've already said this a couple of times, but it looks like Wizards has compensated for the sort of lack of removal, the seeming lack of good removal, by also limiting the number of evasive creatures. So a creature that gives all of your other creatures flying is very good and makes up for the lack of creatures with natural evasion. So I like Zenith Seeker a lot. I mean, it's just the kind of thing that's obviously a bomb in limited. And then Aven Initiate doesn't look like much with its 2 toughness and all, but having a decent powered flyer twice is always a good deal. And I guess the last blue card I'll mention here is Essence Scatter, which, you know, I don't usually love counterspells unlimited, but creatures are the name of the game in limited, and this is essentially a 2-mana removal spell against any creature except for Serpapart in the entire format, so pretty good. Now it's time to talk about black and whether or not it's any good in the sealed environment. I said earlier that black lacks the amount of hard removal that it usually has at common and uncommon. We've only got like one piece that says, you know, get rid of this guy unconditionally, and that's like 5 mana. Most of it is -1/-1 counter, synergies, and stuff like that. So you'd think I wouldn't like black as much as I normally do in sealed, but to the contrary, even though we don't have as much hard removal, black is where a lot of the synergy is in this format. You know, you've got -1/-1 counter synergies, you've got zombie synergies, you've got cycling synergies in black. So there's a lot going on in black, and it serves as a linchpin for a lot of the different strategies in the format. First of all, as far as -1/-1 counter synergies, there's Ruthless Sniper, Splendid Agony, and Nest of Scarabs. Now, Nest of Scarabs looks like a trap, but in a lot of the sealed pulls that I've gotten so far, it looks like you can put together a pretty decent Nest of Scarabs deck with black and green in sealed, providing you get the correct pieces. Splendid Agony you will always play. It's just so flexible, and it's instant speed, and it's essentially removal. So Splendid Agony is fantastic and really turns on a lot of synergies in this format. Ruthless Sniper, I usually don't like 1-drops in sealed, but this is a definite exception. You know, cycling or discarding a card is not too hard in this format. Paying the extra 1 in sealed isn't hard either. And being able to remove or at least cripple your opponent's creatures is insanely desirable. Speaking of this -1/-1 counter strategy, some of black's creatures help synergize with this strategy very well, like Doom Dissenter and Doom Beetle are 2 good examples at 2 mana. Doom Dissenter, you can put -1/-1 counters on it. It'll come right back even bigger. That's pretty sweet. And then Doom Beetle is an early game creature with a lot of toughness. So you can put 3 -1/-1 counters on it and it's still not dead. Now, if you do end up killing your own guys with -1/-1 counters, don't worry, black's got plenty of ways to get him back, but the best are Gravedigger and Wander in Death. Gravedigger is just a quintessential classic limited environment magic creature. This thing is very good because it's a 2/2 body that provides you card advantage in the form of the best creature in your graveyard. Same thing with Wander in Death. Don't underestimate this card. Not only can you cycle it, but it is essentially card advantage, and if you're killing your own guys for whatever reason with these -1/-1 counter synergies, then you can get them back with Wander. If they do manage to remove your creatures, even despite a lack of removal, then you can get them back with Wander in Death. So these are just good cards, regardless of whether or not you're utilizing this counter strategy. And the last thing, as far as these -1/-1 counter synergies, Soul Stinger and Baleful Ammit are both awesome creatures. Soul Stinger can be removal when it dies, which is always awesome. And then Baleful Ammit can be a 4-power lifelinker for just 3 mana. That's insanely powerful in sealed. I find lifelink to be an underestimated and awesome ability in limited. Now here's that one piece of high-costed, unconditional removal. Its final reward. It's just 5 mana for exile a guy. You will play that in this format, I promise you. And to finish things off, I'm just going to talk about some value creatures that black has. Bone Picker can be pretty good, especially, again, if you're killing your own guys. Bone Picker can be very good, but even if you play it for 4 mana, it's still fine. It's a 3-power flyer with Death Touch. That's awesome. It's worth 4 in sealed. Grim Strider is fantastic. Another creature that's worth every bit of its 4 mana casting cost, because this can very often be at least a 4/4 or 5/5 guy for you. And if you've dumped your hand, it's enormous. So Grim Strider looks awesome to me. And then finally, Wasteland Scorpion, I at least need to mention, because Death Touch creatures, especially ones with more than 1 power a lot of the time, are really good and threatening in limited environments. Red's turn next. We're going to talk about all those commons and uncommons. And red is a pretty well put together color from what I can tell, because it's getting a lot of pretty decent burn in this set and a lot of very aggressive creatures and some of the better exert guys too. So let's talk about all those real quick. First of all, as far as the burn, we get Deem Worthy, Magma Spray, and Electrify, all at common or uncommon. Electrify and Deem Worthy are just very solid, Deem Worthy, you can cycle it to kill a smaller guy and draw a card. That's cool, but if you pay all the mana for it, then you're going to take down more or less whatever's on their side of the board. You'll take down their best creature, almost guaranteed. But red's real worth in this set lies in all of its really aggressive creatures. Look at some of these. First of all, True Heart Twins is awesome and gives a boost to all of your guys when it swings in, even though it's already fairly effectively costed for a sealed environment, but when it swings in, it gives a boost to all of your dudes, and that's absolutely awesome. This can be a bomb. Warfire Javelineers looks weird at first, but I'd say that if you only have a couple of instants or sorceries in your graveyard, let's say you have 2, the card is probably worth it. At 2, it can at least take out a small guy on your opponent's side of the board, and that is removal on a body, which is unbelievable in Limited. So if you can just get 2 or even 3 out of Javelineers, he is an insanely good creature. Blood Rage Brawler is, the second biggest 2-drop at uncommon or common in the whole format. So even though you got to get rid of a card, that's okay. And let's say you built red-black or something, you can always use things like Gravedigger or Wander in Death to bring back whatever you discarded, put it back in your hand. So there are multiple ways to make Blood Rage Brawler better than it already is, but it's already a 2-mana creature with 4 power, which will give you all the presence in the early game. And sometimes we lead to wins because there's no way they can trade with it until like turn 5. So good card. And then Minotaur Sure Shot is something that you have to look at a couple of times before realizing that it's actually pretty good. 3-mana 2/3s are at least okay. They are baseline in limited environments. But this one has reach, so it can already block the limited number of flyers there are, take down a couple of them through trading with them. But it can also be a mana sink, another very good thing in Sealed that we actually don't have a whole lot of this time around. There are not as many mana sinks as you normally get, so we'll take what we can get. If you can just pump like 4 mana into this guy, he can be 4 power, which isn't bad. And then finally, Pathmaker Initiate is just like a couple of the last creatures we've looked at, Minotaur Sure Shot, Warfire Javelineers. It doesn't look super impressive at first glance, but trust me, there's going to be a lot of games won with a Pathmaker Initiate. There's going to be a lot of board stalls in this format, again, from what I can tell. And so just having a guy that can get through a creature for 2 every turn, like 3 or 4 turns in a row, is likely to win you the game. And finally, we're at green now. Green has a number of impressive cards in this format. I'm usually not the hugest fan of green in Sealed. It's just like big dumb creatures a lot. But this time around, green brings a lot of synergy to the table. First of all, green is the other -1/-1 counter color in the format, so green-black counters looks to be a pretty easy to make and reliable limited deck here. But as far as those synergies go, we've got Crocodile of the Crossing, which looks absolutely just ridiculous. The card looks awesome. And Exemplar of Strength, which is the single biggest uncommon 2-drop in the entire format, or at least has the potential to be. Having a 4/4 on turn 2, as long as you had a 1-drop, is pretty dope, and it gives you more of a reason to play 1-drops, but I'm just not so sure that you want to. Exemplar of Strength can come down as a 4/4 and eat one of your smaller creatures on like turn 4, and it's still a pretty good play even that late in the game. And there's also Quarry Hauler. Quarry Hauler can either, let's say you put -1/-1 counters on your opponent's creatures. Well, you can put another one on that same creature and make it smaller, or maybe finish it off. Or if you've got -1/-1 counters on your creatures that maybe you put there yourself, you can take at least one of them off with a Quarry Hauler. And it's a decent body. 4 power, 4 mana, not terrible. I'll finally finish off talking about the -1/-1 counter strategies by just showing you Defiant Gravemaw and Shed Weakness. Shed Weakness, if you build the deck correctly, can be just as good as a Giant Growth a lot of the time, and in some ways screw up your opponent's combat math a little bit easier too. So just a great combat trick right there for just 1 mana. And Defiant Gravemaw goes especially well with other creatures that put -1/-1 counters on stuff. Green also supports Exert fairly well with a couple of decent creatures in Hooded Brawler and Watchful Naga. Watchful Naga can draw you cards, which is just good. I mean, it's just straight up good. Even if you think it's going to die, sometimes you just want the card. And then Hooded Brawler is extremely aggressively costed. It's a lot like Crocodile, just very aggressively costed for what it does. This is basically a 3-mana, 5-power guy. Even if you have to exert it, that's a good deal. Green, as usual, is also a great way of fixing mana, but honestly, in this set, there aren't like artifacts that fix your mana, and the cycle of lands that fixes your mana are all rare. So it's a little bit harder to get the mana that you want in this set, and of course, I suggest a 2-mana deck, but even if you do need additional fixing, green is the only real way to get it. You've got things like Orashra Cultivator, Naga Vitalis, and Gift of Paradise. All of these are effective, both cards that can fix your mana, and in the case of Naga Vitalist and Gift of Paradise, they can ramp you too, which is pretty good in this set. That's got an awful lot of stuff at 5 mana. And I'll finish off green by just talking about a couple of creatures that catch my eye. Shefet Monitor and Scaled Behemoth. Shefet Monitor is pretty good at its mana cost for its power toughness. and is splashable, but it can also basically go and get a desert or a land. That's awesome. You know, it can ramp you. It draws you a card too. So like, just Chef It Monitor has a lot of good uses in this format, even if you're just not using it as like a solid guy. But it is a solid guy too. It's a good body for the cost. And then Scaled Behemoth may have a fair commitment to green, but still awesome. You know, a 7 toughness creature that you can put your own -1/-1 counters on from your other guys if you want to, but your opponent can't target it with anything. Okay, I think we have finally finished our Amonkhet pre-release guide. Those were all 5 colors, plus gold, artifacts, lands, all of that different stuff. So I hope that this helps you out, and I also hope that you liked the video if you enjoyed the video. You can also follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev, and you should subscribe if you haven't done that yet, because the next undertakings for the channel are going to be deck techs. I've got them all but finalized, the first 3, but I still want to know what you want to see. Please let me know what you're excited about in Amonkhet Standard, and I will get to work on that right away, and I should have the first deck tech up by either Wednesday or Thursday morning. So hope you're cool with that, because I'm going to be putting it out. And I really hope that this guide helps you a lot. Good luck at your pre-release. I'm Dev from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards.